question for everyone. Are you ready for New Year, the new season? Yes. Yes, we are ready for the new year, the new season in our lives. Especially when there is a new season come, I always read this poem by Anne Frank. The title is called I Look Not Back. So let us read it together verse by verse. Ready, go. I look not back. God knows the fruitless efforts, the wasted hours, the sinning, the regrets. I'll leave them all with Him who blots the record, and merciful forgives and then forgets. But I look up into the face of Jesus, for there my heart can rest. My fears are still, and there is joy and love and life for darkness, and perfect peace and every hope fulfilled. Yes, she decided to look to God for her new season. In the same way, when we are ready for the new season, new year, we should continue to look to God. Especially today, we can find out how to be ready for the new season through this passage. So let us read book of Deuteronomy chapter 31 and verse 8 one more time. Ready, go. It is the Lord who goes before you. He will be with you. He will not leave you or forsake you. Do not fear or be dismayed. To begin with, let us find out the background of the passage today. At that time, there was a new transition for the Israelites who were on the wilderness journey. So what was the new transition? Yes, it was a new transition of the leader. One more time, it was a new transition of the leader. To be specific, at that time, Moses used to be a great leader for the Israelites. Moses has been leading and guiding the Israelites from Egypt to the promised land. So Moses had good leadership in leading the Israelites. In other words, the Israelites trusted in Moses' leadership. Of course, the Israelites, they sometimes complained to Moses before. Nevertheless, the Israelites, they still follow and trusted in Moses' leadership on their wilderness journey. However, there was one problem with Moses. So what was the problem? Let us read Deuteronomy chapter 31 and verse 1 and verse 2. Ready, go. So Moses continued to speak these words to all Israel. Verse 2. And he said to them, I am 120 years old. I am no longer able to go out and come in. The Lord has said to me, you should not go over this Jordan. Unfortunately, Moses was too old to lead the Israelites. In other words, Moses was not able to be a leader for the Israelites. Of course, Moses, he also wanted to cross over Jordan with Israelites. However, his time was almost over. In other words, God did not allow Moses because of his sinfulness, because of his circumstance. Therefore, Moses, he was not able to conquest the land of Canaan. So the Israelites, they were worried about the absence of leadership. One more time, the Israelites, they were worried about the absence of leadership. Therefore, Moses, he encouraged the Israelites who were fearful. Let us read Deuteronomy chapter 31 and verse 6. Ready, go. Be strong and courageous. Do not fear or be in dread of them. For it is the Lord your God who goes with you. He will not leave you or forsake you. Likewise, Moses encouraged the Israelites not to be afraid of their circumcision. To be specific, Moses also shared that God will be with the Israelites. Of course, Moses himself could not go with the Israelites anymore, but God was still with the Israelites. In other words, God was on their side. Therefore, the Israelites should not fear their circumcision. Especially, God did not fail the Israelites. To be specific, God chose a new leader for the Israelites. So who was the new leader? Yes, it was Joshua. For example, let us read book of Deuteronomy chapter 31 and verse 7 together. Radical. Then Moses summoned Joshua and said to him in the sight of Israel, be strong and courageous, for you should go with these people into the land that the Lord has sworn to their fathers to give them, and you shall put them in possession of it. Likewise, Moses encouraged Joshua to lead the Israelites to the promised land. In other words, Joshua, he became a new leader for the Israelites. So who was Joshua? Yes, Joshua had served under Moses before. Therefore, Joshua received authority from Moses. Likewise, Joshua had the ability to lead the Israelites. That's why God chose Joshua to be the new leader. Therefore, the new transition was a new leader, Joshua. In other words, Joshua had to continue to fight the military in order to conquer the land of Canaan. Of course, it was a privilege to become a new leader for the Israelites. However, Joshua, he was still worried about his circumcision. To be specific, Joshua, he was assured that he will be a good leader like Moses. In other words, Moses was a great leader for the Israelites. Therefore, there might be people who still remember his leadership. Also, Joshua, he did not know how he would lead the Israelites to be saved and conquer other enemies in Canaan. To be specific, there might have been many enemies who tried to accuse Joshua and the Israelites. Likewise, Joshua was worried about his leadership and his journey. So do you understand the background of the passage today? Yes, Moses had to step down from his leadership, and Joshua became a new leader for the Israelites. However, Joshua was still worried about his leadership and his journey. Nevertheless, God was with Joshua. God was with Joshua. Especially Moses encouraged Joshua through today's passage. In other words, Moses explained how God will protect Joshua's journey. So let us read Deuteronomy chapter 31 and verse 8, our passage today. And this is encouragement. Ready, go. It is the Lord who goes before you. He will be with you. He will not leave you or forsake you. Do not fear or be dismayed. To begin with, we should first remember the name of God. To be specific, Moses did not call God as the name of God in his encouragement. In other words, when you read the passage today, Moses used the word Lord as the name of God. It is the Lord. And when Moses used the word Lord, he used Hebrew term Yahweh. Especially people call God Yahweh when they had a personal relationship with God. Also, it was used for God's covenant people. So can you say together personal relationship with God? and God's covenant people. Therefore, Moses used the word Lord Yahweh in order to express the personal relationship with God and Moses. To be specific, God chose Moses, and God chose Joshua as the next leader. Therefore, there was a personal relationship between God and Joshua. That's why Moses used the name of God, Lord, not God. He used the word Lord, Yahweh. Therefore, Joshua, he was in God's hands and his plan. Therefore, Joshua has no reason to fear his circumstance. Also, Moses explained how God will protect Joshua's journey. First of all, Moses was assured that God will go before Joshua. God will go before Joshua. Especially when Moses used the word before in the passage today, he used Hebrew term pane. And the Hebrew term pane refers to front, former times, and the ahead. In other words, the Lord will go ahead of Joshua. Let us read verse 18, our passage with the message version once again. Ready, go. God is striding ahead of you. He is right there with you. He won't let you down. He won't leave you. Don't be intimidated. Don't worry. Likewise, God will be there for Joshua. Especially, we can find an example of when God was already there for his people in the Old Testament. For example, let us read book of Exodus chapter 13 and verse 21. Ready, go. And the Lord went before them by day in a pillar of cloud to lead them along the way, and by night a pillar of fire to give them light, that they might travel by day and by night. And the Lord went before them. At that time, God was the Israelites. To be specific, God sent the pillar of cloud and the pillar of fire to lead and keep safe the Israelites. It was already there before the Israelites passed by. That's why Moses used the same Hebrew term pane, before, as the same as our passage today. In other words, God is prepared. God is prepared to lead and protect the Israelites and Joshua. Therefore, Joshua had no reason to worry about his future. In other words, the Lord God held Joshua's journey. And secondly, Moses encouraged Joshua that God will be with him. God will be with him. He said that he will be with you. Can you say it together? One more time. He will be with you. Yes, Moses was assured that God will be with Joshua. Of course, Joshua was not sure about his leadership, but he did not need to worry since God will be with him. No matter how it will be risky or dangerous the journey, God promised to be with Joshua and the Israelites. Especially when Moses used the phrase, be with you, it indicates God's assurance of protection. Can you say it together? God's assurance of protection. Likewise, Moses encouraged Joshua that God will protect his journey. Therefore, we can find another example of God's protection in the Old Testament. For example, let us read Genesis chapter 21 and verse 22. Ready, go. At that time, Abimelech and Phicol, the commander of his army, said to Abraham, God is with you in all that you do. God is with you in all that you do. At the time, Abimelech and people encouraged Abraham not to fear, since God will be with Abraham and keep his promises. In the same way, Moses also encouraged Joshua, since God will be with him. Therefore, God was there to protect Joshua. And thirdly, Moses encouraged Joshua not to fear once again. He said that do not fear. Can you say it together? One more time. Do not fear. Yes, Moses encouraged Joshua not to fear. As I mentioned earlier, Joshua was not sure about his leadership. In other words, Joshua still feared uncertainty. Especially, God also encouraged Joshua directly once again. For example, let us read Joshua chapter 1 and verse 9. Ready, go. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be frightened and do not be dismayed. For the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. Wherever you go. Likewise, God commanded Joshua not to fear for his journey. Especially, there was a reason why Joshua should not be afraid. For example, so what was the reason? Let us read verse 2. Ready, go. Moses, my servant, is dead. Now therefore rise, go over this Jordan, you and all these people, into the land that I am giving to them, the people of Israel. Likewise, God promised Joshua to become a leader to go over the Jordan. In other words, Joshua had no reason to fear, since God will keep his promises. That's why Moses also encouraged Joshua before the transition. In other words, Joshua had no reason to fear his leadership and his journey, because God will keep his promises with Joshua and the Israelites. Therefore, Joshua, he was ready to begin the new season in his life. So today, we meditate on the new transition. Yes, God chose Joshua as a next leader for the Israelites. In other words, God prepared the new season for both Joshua and the Israelites. However, this story did not end yet, since it teaches us to live as Christians who are ready for the new season. First of all, trusting God who is with us. Can you say it together? Trusting God who is with us. As Moses encouraged Joshua to trust God who is with him, we should also trust God who is with us. Especially, God has been good and faithful to us in this year 2025. Can you think about God for this year? Yes, God has been good and faithful to us this year 2025. Do you agree? Yes. Yes, God has done great things this year. However, it is not done yet. In other words, God's great things will still work on the new year, new season 2026. Especially, God also encouraged Joshua and the Israelites to remember his great things first. So let us read Deuteronomy chapter 31 and verse 4. Read, go. And the Lord will do them as he did to Seoul and all the kings of the Amorites, and to their land when he destroyed them. Likewise, God already defeated the enemies through his power for the Israelites. Therefore, God wanted to Joshua to remember his great things before. Therefore, when we are ready for the new season, we should first remember God's goodness and faithfulness. And we should continue to trust God who is with us. As God was with Joshua and the Israelites, God will be with us in our new season. Especially, we can find one of God's attributes in this story. God is omnipresent. Can you say it together? Yes, God is everywhere. As His presence was with Joshua and the Israelites, God will be with us. God will be with us wherever we go and whatever we do for the new season. Therefore, we only need to trust God who is always with us. That's why God sent His only Son, Jesus Christ, to be with us. Of course, we celebrate Christmas, last Christmas worship. However, we still remember Jesus once again. So who is Jesus? Let us read Matthew chapter 1 and verse 23. Ready, go. Behold, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and they shall call his name Emmanuel, which means God with us. Yes, Jesus is Emmanuel, God with us. Jesus came to this world in order to be with us. Also, it was the same purpose when Jesus ascended into heaven. Let us read Matthew chapter 28 and verse 20. Ready, go. Teaching them to observe all that I command you, and behold, I am with you always to the end of the age. Yet Jesus also promised to be with us through His presence. Especially, it is the same God who was with Joshua. No matter how uncertain Joshua was, God was with Joshua through His presence. In the same way, we should trust God who is with us. God will be with us through His presence for our new season. Trusting God who is with us. And secondly, fear not. Can you say it together?
Fear
One more time. Fear not. Yes, we should not fear our circumstance. We should not fear our new season. No matter how we are struggling right now, no matter how we are uncertain for the new season, we should not fear since God will go before us. Especially God, as God already went before Joshua and the Israelites, God will also go before us. In other words, God will prepare what we need in our new season. For example, I want to share my story with you once again. Last 2 years ago, December 2024, at the time, I was worrying about the future of our new cafe location. However, God opened the way and God prepared this new place for Odinery Cafe and Church. Yes, God went before me. Of course, it took a while to prepare and move here, but it was possible because of God who went before me. The reason I share my story is because God will go before you. In other words, God will faithfully provide what we need according to His will in the new season. Especially, you can also find the name of God here. God is Jehovah Jireh. Can you say it together? God is Jehovah Jireh. Yes, God is the provider. God is the provider. As God provided the way for Joshua and the Israelites and myself, God also provide your needs for this new year. Therefore, we should not fear for the new season. Especially, Jesus also came into this world to encourage people who are fearful. Let us read Matthew chapter 14 and verse 27. Ready, go. But immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, "Take her, it is I. Do not be afraid." At the time, Jesus encouraged the disciples who were fearful, so that Jesus encouraged them not to fear, since He was with them. In the same way, we should not fear our trouble or our uncertainty for the new season. God will continue to be with our journey, and He will continue to provide our needs. And finally, I want to share one hymn together. And this hymn is written by Thomas Christian, and the title is called Great is Thy Faithfulness. Especially Thomas Christian, he was a good teacher and Methodist minister. However, he had a health problem. Therefore, he had to struggle with both health and financial issues. Nevertheless, he only trusted in God's faithfulness. Therefore, he wrote this hymn in order to testify to God's faithfulness. So let us hear first verse and chorus together. When you hear, let us praise together too. So let us hear first, and then let us have time to pray.
Great is thy faithfulness, O God my Father. There is no shadow of turning with thee. Thou changest not, thy compassions, they fail not. As thou hast been, thou forever wilt be. Great is thy faithfulness. Great is thy faithfulness. Morning by morning, new mercies I see. All I have needed, thy hand hath provided. Great is thy faithfulness, Lord, unto me.
Great is thy faithfulness, great is thy faithfulness. Morning by morning, new mercies I see. All I have needed, thy hand hath provided. Great is thy faithfulness, Lord, unto me. Yes, he praised God's faithfulness once again. The reason I share this hymn, since his faithfulness will be with us. God will continue to be with us and provide our needs for the new season. Therefore, let us continue to trust God once again. And finally, I have one last question for everyone for this year. Are you ready for the new season? Yes. Remember, ready for the new season, trust in God who is with us. God is our provider. Fear not. Can you say together? Ready for the new season, trust in God who is with us. God is our provider. Fear not. Amen.